I'm Dr. Akanyele Umoja, professor of Africana Studies, Georgia State University. And we're really blessed tonight to have this conversation, presentation on the great Fela Kuti. I must take credit that it was my idea to do this, and it was. But I'm also responsible, or actually have to give responsibility to two of the panelists tonight. But let me introduce our panel and our hosts. We have a guest host tonight, and that's Sister Toe Singer, who's an Atlanta-based musician, singer, songwriter, and media personality. And she's going to be our host for this evening. I didn't feel qualified to be the host. And so at the recommendation of one of our panelists, we asked Sister Toe Singer to join us tonight to play that role. Our panelists will be Lagos, Nigeria-born Pan-Africanist, DJ, and author of the books Afrobeat Got Soul. And that is Mason Oruru. Mason had actually had the blessing of meeting and spending time with the subject of the night, Fela Kuti. And I should also mention that Mason was a student of mine, and he works in our department. He's achieving his master's degree, hopefully have a PhD after that. And so just hearing the stories of Mason talking about him meeting Fela is what inspired us to do this program tonight. We also have the person, and I say he's responsible because he's the one, I had heard of Fela Kuti before, but he's the one that encouraged me that I really need to listen to this music and get into it. And so I think I've been blessed by Professor Masiki Scales, who's a folklorist, historian, musician, and band leader of the Common Ground Collective. Brother Masiki has performed internationally, particularly in Ghana, and is a recipient of the Georgia Governor's Award for Arts and Humanity. And I should mention, when we say he's a professor, he's an adjunct professor in the Department of Africana Studies. And so at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to our host and hopefully be able to come in and talk to you later. Sister Toe Singer, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Umoja. It's such a pleasure to be here this lovely evening. We want to welcome all our guests and scholars and students that have tuned in, and all lovers of African culture and music. We are gathered here today under the auspices of the Georgia State University Department of Africana Studies 2023 Freedom Lecture Series in collaboration with the Auburn Avenue Research Library to explore and celebrate the enduring legacy of such a musical icon and activist whose influence resonates far beyond the borders of Nigeria and the African continent. Just a few housekeeping rules. While the speaker is talking, if you have questions, just type them in the chat and we'll get to them on a first come, first serve basis. And if you're feeling what the presenter or panelists tonight are sharing, Fela is known for a slogan. He says, everybody say, yeah, yeah, just to give it a little, fun vibe in here. So if you're feeling the presentation or you're agreeing with something, just type, yeah, yeah, into the chat. We'll get the message. And so Dr. Umoja has already introduced the panelists tonight, but I'm just going to reiterate and just go deeper with their bio. And first of all, we want to ask our presenters to please adhere to their allocated time slots of 15 minutes of presentations, and then we'll ask questions. I'll ask questions, and then we're going to throw it open. I believe we have also some special guests in the house, but we'll keep that, a surprise as we go into the panel discussion tonight. And also, if you're here already, please don't forget to follow the Facebook page for the Department of Africana Studies, Georgia State University. Follow and like the page. And this is being recorded for educational purposes. I'm not going to assume that everybody knows who Fela Kuti is, so I'm just going to read a short bio of who Fela Kuti is. Apparently, this month of October is Celebration Month worldwide because he was born on the 15th of October in 1938 in Nigeria. Fela Kuti was a Nigerian musician, band leader, composer, political activist, and Pan-Africanist. Fela Kuti was born Olufela Olusegun Oludotun Ransom Kuti, again on October 15, 1938. He was a musical maestro, a masterful composer, and an unyielding advocate for justice. Fela pioneered Afrobeat, a genre that seamlessly wove together the sounds of his native Nigeria, jazz, high life, and funk, setting the stage for a musical revolution that would resonate globally. He is the king of Afrobeat, a Nigerian music genre that he coined that combines West African music with African-American funk and jazz, with anti-colonial and liberation lyrics and themes. He was a revolutionary and a strong advocate for social and political justice. As we navigate the panel discussion this evening, we invite you to delve into the intricacies of Fela Kuti's life and work, exploring the ways in which his legacy has shaped and continues to shape the cultural, political, and artistic landscape, leaving an indelible mark in our world. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce again our esteemed panelists, each of whom brings a wealth of knowledge, passion, and expertise to shed light on the remarkable legacy of Fela Anikulapo Kuti. We're going to start off with Mr. Mason Oruru, Lagos, Nigeria-born Pan-Africanist, DJ, and author of Afrobeat Gospel. He's been living in Atlanta since 1983 and has worked as a director of support services in the hospital support industry. He's currently pursuing his master's in Africana Studies with plans to advance to a PhD in history. So over to you, Mr. Mason. The floor is yours for 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here. This is really something I really wanted to be a participant in. And I'm so blessed to be around here, around this time when we're talking about a legendary Fela Anikulapo Kuti. Let me go ahead and, share my screen. Hold on here. I can share screen. Stop trouble with that. All right, can you see the screen now? Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, what I'm really going to do, since considering the time constraint, I'm just going to make sure I'm just hitting some bullet points. I'm not really going to go and read everything that is on here. I'm just going to go through some bullet points and some very, very important aspects of Fela's life. You already heard when he was born. Oh wow, excuse me, my hands. Fela came from a very prominent Yoruba family. His father was a reverend. He founded his secondary school called Abeokuta Grammar School. His mother was an activist. She was a very influential woman in Nigerian and African politics. She once led a campaign to overthrow the Oba, the king of Abeokuta, and she was the first Black woman to visit China, and was also the first woman to drive a car in Nigeria. She also met Kwame Nkrumah, who she later introduced to Fela himself. Go to the next slide. This is Fela's first wife, Remy Taylor. They married in London in 1961 when Fela was in school there. Fela when Fela was sent to England to study, but his parents had really wanted him to study medicine, but he switched to music. On the right here, you see Fela and his mother, and also his first wife, Remy Taylor, and their 3 children. And sitting there with Fela on Fela's lap is Femi. 1963 to 1969, this is the period where you have the high life jazz. Fela returned to Nigeria. His band, the Kula Lubitos, they were playing a form of high life. And this high life jazz, let me tell you about it. It's just a genre that kind of was formed in England by the late, great Ginger Foloncho Johnson and Nigeria's premier band leader, Bobby Benson. As an experimental music of mixing high life music and jazz music. And that was what Fela was playing all through when he came back to Nigeria from 1963 to 1969. In 1969, Fela embarked on a trip to the United States for some gigs. But it turned out that he was stranded for, his manager abandoned him and he had to be playing gigs in avenues, and then including the Haiti. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. In Los Angeles. This is where he met Sandra Smith, who later became Sandra Isidore, born in Los Angeles, who later drastically altered his social political thinking, awareness, and shaping his Pan-African worldview. The birth of Afrobeat. The rhythm and the foundation and rhythm of Afrobeat is as a music genre was attributed to longtime late drummer Tony Allen. Tony Allen was like kind of a backbone in terms of the rhythmic mastermind of Afrobeat. The Enlightenment, I'm not going to go through all the reading, but in this particular slide here, you can see that Sandra Isidora introduced Fela to a lot of African-American struggles, Black Power movement, and that's where he had a connection, like he connect the African struggles for colonialism or neo-colonialism to the African-American struggle, and that's where his Pan-African ideology kind of emanated from. What is Afrobeats? Let's define what the music is. Although I know Tusinga already gave us a snapshot, but in terms of me as an author, I gave my own synopsis of actually what the music means to me, or how the definition, because there's different definition of Afrobeat where how historically people want to rewrite our story. They want to just create something that is not really the antithesis of what we're talking about. Afrobeat historians have analyzed that the progression that catapulted the Afrobeat phenomenon was defined along rhythmic lines of interlocking horns and guitars. The call and response followed suit by matriculating around tight, funky bass lines. Others have tried to eliminate the element of soul in the development of Afrobeat. I do not. Afrobeat, in my music, my book called Afrobeat God Soul, I define that Afrobeat is a cross-pollination of sounds in pride and activism that incorporated chanted African traditional vocals and beats such as high life and Fuji with jazz, funk, and soul. These are iconic albums. The album here to the right, Fela's London Scene, that's the first Afrobeat album. The other one is the first live Afrobeat live album. As a matter of fact, that's Fela's live, Fela Ransom Kuti live with Gigi Baker. That was the first album I ever purchased in my life. You could see me in the streets of Lagos, like, wow, it's an unbelievable feeling. James Brown and Fela connection. There is a connection between James Brown and Fela. I didn't really know this at first. It was during my research for my book that I really discovered a lot of the information concerning the connection between James Brown and Fela. James Brown came to Nigeria in 1970, and when he came, his band members went to Fela's club, Afro Sport. It was called Afro Sport then, but not here the Africa Shrine. They went to Afro Sport, and without James Brown, when they came back, Bootsy Collins, who was a member of the JBs at that time, told James Brown that is the funkiest thing they've ever heard. And they went back the next time, not this time with Dave Matthews. Dave Matthews is the music director, James Brown director. And a kid gave Dave Matthews some of Fela's music, Fela's tape, and they brought it to the United States and did some incorporation of that. So there has been I won't call it a rivalry, but it's been a camaraderie in terms of greatness between these two musicians. Fela and James Brown, to me, are the two greatest musicians that ever lived. I'm not going to tell you who is the greatest. You want to read my book to know who I picked as the greatest, but those to me are the two greatest musicians that ever lived. In this period, and one thing I noticed when I was going to the shrine was Fela, they search you before you get in. And I didn't know the reason for that at that time, but it was because Fela doesn't really play his songs that he has already recorded. He always plays music that is ready, that he has not put on wax. So you're not going there to the shrine to be singing along about songs that you already heard. You are only going there to just listen to something new that is going to be coming up. So they didn't want you to just come there and then, having tapes and, and stealing music. So that was the, in this period of this slide here, 1970 to 1973, I call this the early years, the party years and exuberant years. Fela is well known for Pan-African lyrics, pride, real spirited, but also at the beginning, there was a lot of party songs. There was a lot of, aria. Aria just means celebration, na fight, na boy, all this. So there was a mixture then at the beginning of Afrobeat, although there was also some, message songs like Black Man's Cry, by Africa, Why Black Man They Suffer, Don't Gag Me. Those are also, content songs, but in this period also, they were also party songs. This slide here, on one Sunday afternoon, I was at a shrine and I looked up and I saw somebody dancing. It was my next door neighbor. And I said, wow, that is Ngozi. So then I talked to her. I said, Ngozi, I didn't know, I knew she was, like a fast or, I know she was out there a lot in terms of, dancing and so, but I never knew she was a Fela dancer. And one day she introduced me to Fela backstage. She said, well, I'm going to introduce you to Fela. So we went backstage and she introduced me to Fela. And Fela pulled me aside and all he asked me, and this is a family show, so I'm not really going to say specifically what Fela said, but, Fela just pulled me aside and just told me all I need to do is just come tell him who is messing with her. It's funny because I saw Fela several times after that, but we never really did a one-to-one communication. So in that man's life, that was the only communication we ever did. Gentleman, this was an album around that same period that Fela released. This is about, an African man who wants to, be European or who is not really proud of his heritage, who want to just wear suits and tie on hot summer day, hot day. So it's about a mentality issue. Expensive shit, I like more clothes. This is where things are starting to get heated up, in terms of Fela. Fela was accused of possession of marijuana. And then he was Alagmo Close is the headquarters of the police station in Lagos. They got him in there, and what they did was that they asked him to excrete and then tested his excretion just to find from some marijuana. That's how he said, Fela said, if they're gonna do this, then that means my shit is expensive. That's where this expensive shit came from. Why Black Man They Suffer? This song was actually released in 1971, well, it was recorded in 1971, but it was not released until 1974 because Decca Records had an issue with it. They thought it was too controversial or something like that, but this was released in 1974. Fela went into details of how, okay, the colonialists, they came to Africa, took our land, took our riches, and, in turn gave us their colony and then enslaved. And that is why Black Man They Suffer today. It was a very, very huge, recording around 1974. One thing I'd like to tell the audience is that, and through my research in trying to know even more about Fela and how he's being portrayed here in the Western world, there was a lot of misconception or what I would call discographies, where not exactly the years of the releases were accurate. A song might have been released in 75, over here you say 77. So I just want to let the audience know in terms of accuracy in content and discography. First direct attack on the government, Zombie. Zombie was another huge hit where Fela talked about the mentality of the armed forces. They just do one thing, go, and they are not really, they just follow orders. Fela bought advertisement pages in the Daily Times. Daily Times is a Lagos newspaper, and the Punch newspapers, where he wrote scratching commentaries as the chief priest says. Fela by this time also was calling himself the Black President. This chief priest says just one page, a whole full page of ad. I think, I'm not particularly, I don't remember exactly now, but I think it's weekly that Fela does this in the newspaper where he writes columns and commentaries. Fela, well, I'm not going to go through that. Yellow Fever. And Festac 1977, I included this because I included this piece about Festac because it was very important at this time, because 1977, this Festac was where is the second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture. This is where all Black people from all over the world came to Nigeria, came to Lagos to celebrate Black culture, Pan-Africanism, and the heritage of Blackness. Fela refused to go to this event because he said that the theater, the places that were built to house or celebrate this event were built by Europeans. And if we're going to be celebrating African, heritage, then we could have been building that by ourselves. We have enough engineers, we have enough, So he protested that. So what happened was that Fela's shrine became Festac, so to speak, because a lot of the dignitaries, bands, Fela's shrine became a hotspot. People went there. I also went to the shrine, one of those occasions where Stevie Wonder performed with Fela. So the authorities were not pleased about that. 6 days after Festac, Fela's house was raided by a combination of soldiers and police, burned down to the ground. The premise or the excuse the government gave was that Fela's members or band members or his guys were involved in some altercation with some police at the intersection close to Fela's house. But to me personally, and to a lot of Nigerians, that was just a pretext. They were determined to do this. And Fela's mother, well, I'll go, well, then we go to 1978. 78 was when he married 27 women. That's when he changed his name from Ransom to Anikulapo Kuti. Anikulapo means somebody who has death in his pocket. 1979, he created Movement of the People, his political party, but the party was rejected by the government to participate. His mother died during that raid in Fela's compound in 1977. His mother was thrown from the second floor downstairs, and she died of injuries about a year or so later. Symbolically, Fela carried a coffin that it's not a coffin with his mother in there, but it was a symbolic coffin that he carried to the head of state that you killed her, you bury her. And he was beaten, his people were beaten, and all those, it was just
Listen, we have less than a minute left. Help us round it up quickly.
Right, yeah, I'm almost there. This is the inside the Kalakuta Museum. You'll see the artifacts, you see here where his typewriter, and you see right here where it says Fela. Now Fela's party takes off, but it didn't really take off because the government was, Fela on Broadway, a lot of people, you already know about that, was a very huge thing where, Fela's, I think it was by Bill Jones and Steve Handel put all these things together, and it has been a hit where Fela was exposed more to the Western world through Fela on Broadway. This is his grave, this Kalakutia Museum, and then resources. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mason. That was wonderful. Thank you for giving us an insight to the life, family, background of Fela Kuti. I think one thing that most people don't also know that he's actually a great scholar. I was told that he had one of the biggest libraries in Nigeria at the time with over 1,200 books that people just come in to read, books about, Black history and African spirituality and all that. And speaking of African spirituality, I'll hold that for now. That's a question I would like to ask you later. But for now, we're going to go to our next esteemed panelist. Before I go on, actually, Mr. Mason's book, I had the pleasure of being the editor of that. So you guys need to check it out. It's called Afro Got Soul. Okay. So Professor Mosiki Scales is an adjunct instructor in the African American Studies Department at Georgia State. He has taught history and African studies for more than 15 years in Atlanta area colleges. Professor Scales has a multitude of interests, which include West African history and culture, Jim Crow era, Afrobeat, blues, and jazz. Mosiki Scales, of course, is a folklorist, historian, musician, and band leader of the Common Ground Collective, which I've also had the pleasure of singing with a couple of times. Professor Scales has performed internationally and is the recipient of the Georgia Governor's Award for Arts and Humanity. Professor Scales, take the floor for 15 minutes.
Thank you so much, Tosinger.
You're welcome.
I'd like to start off exploring a bit about my childhood. At about 7 or 8 years old, my parents bought a piano. And as they bought this piano, there's a particular song that came on the radio. It was Parliament Funkadelic's Flashlight, right? So I was raised on some Parliament. My parents raised me right. And listening to this song, Flashlight, there was a particular bass line that just repeated over and over and over, and it never let me go.
Mason, can you stop sharing?
Oh, can you see my screen?
No, we can't. Because I
yeah.
think Mason needs to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Hold on.
So you could or
I shared, but I thought everyone was seeing my screen.
No, I
I
don't.
can see it, the
Why,
Zoom,
why
it
it's
might
not
still
going?
be off,
Hold
and it's
on,
off of Mason's screen.
hold on. I'm not seeing why it's not. Oh wow, let me see here.
You go, Mason, you should see at the top of your screen, it says stop sharing.
Oh yeah, I see now. Sorry.
All right, very good. Now Masika can share.
Okay.
Especially playing all that good music.
Okay, let me see. Trying to. So right, so I'm. It's probably it's right when this song came out. I'm sure. Flashlight playing with the this funky bass line over and over. It would be in the year 1910. Before 1910, group commonly known as African Americans or Black folks mostly lived in the South under debt peonage type of conditions. So moving into northern cities and moving into urban cities, new expressions began to be explored. Old expressions began to be preserved with the likes of the Harlem Renaissance and the development of Chicago blues. So hearing that bass line in Parliament song Flashlight, that taught me this scale that I later called the minor blues scale. I never knew that there would be a connection with that and something called Afrobeat. I didn't have a conception as to what that would be. But I began to explore and do some research and realize that in the summer of 1884 and winter of 1884 to 1885, there was something called the Berlin Conference. And at this Berlin Conference, European powers of the world divided the continent of Africa up into different sections, right? All these territories got colonized, save Ethiopia and Liberia. Liberia had American influence. Ethiopia had Italian influence. But when we listen to the music, when we listen to the music coming from those spaces, particularly in the 1900s into the 2000s, it does not sound like an imitation of those nations that colonized them. Nigeria's popular music does not sound like Britain's music. South Africa's popular music does not sound like Dutch and English music. The same thing we could say from Senegal. In the 19-teens and the 1920s, we heard big band music coming out of South Africa. By the 30s and 40s, rumba and samba. By the time the 60s emerged, we're hearing funk, 70s James Brown, 80s reggae, and now through the 90s until now, hip hop. What is the connection that is taking place? There's a dialogue taking place between the continent of Africa, African nation states, musicians, and those people within the African diaspora. And that's part of a larger conversation that we can explore. And so when we look at quotes like this, we have Fela. In fact, Brother Mason mentioned this quote. Fela had a club in Lagos, and we came to that club, 1970, and they were treating us like kings. We were telling them they're the funkiest cats we ever heard in our life. And they were replying, no, you cats are the ones. I mean, this is the James Brown band. But we were totally wiped out. That was one trip I wouldn't trade for the world. So these are the words of Bootsy Collins upon listening to Fela in Lagos. Bootsy Collins was pretty much the definition of funk in the 1970s. Listening to Bootsy Collins was the bass player for James Brown as young as 16 or 17 years old. James Brown takes him to Nigeria, to Lagos, and James Brown doesn't make the meeting, but his band is connecting with Fela's band, and they're debating on which group is the funkiest. The dialogue continues. Fela stated, I played a lot of jazz in the beginning of my career because it had cultural information that enriched my mind. Coltrane, Miles, as in Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, that era, because I found a heavy relationship between that music and my culture. Later, I used this knowledge to penetrate into the culture of my people, right? We also see, this is blocking me. It's crazy. In the States, people think the Black Power movement drew inspiration from Africa. All these Americans, he's referring to Black Americans, come over here looking for awareness. They don't realize they're the ones who've got it over there. Why were we ashamed to go around in national dress until we saw pictures of Blacks wearing dashikis on 125th Street? I listened to Miles, Coltrane. After I became ideological, I found the reason why this music got me. Walking through the streets back home, I would hear many tapes of these traditional African musicians from the bush. That's when I got the connection. All the sounds that Miles and Coltrane play are very common in the bush. So in this dialogue, as a musician, this was inspiring to see. As Sister Tosinger and Brother Mason have mentioned, that Afrobeat is a combination of jazz, funk, high life, Fuji rhythms, juju rhythms, traditional African rhythms, and we're seeing this component of it that has a Pan-African scope. Post 1969, when Fela connected with Sister Sandra Isidore in LA, that trip had its ups and its downs, that they were working in this hotel. Frank Sinatra came through there, it heard the band. There were times where he questioned whether, hey, that particular music was sustainable. One of the expressions, one of the aspects of the music that I found quite powerful as it relates to Afrobeat is that more than any other genre, including reggae with Bob Marley, Fela coined the term Afrobeat. So it's difficult to mention the word Afrobeat. And to be clear, I'm saying Afrobeat without the S at the end. Afrobeats is different than Afrobeat. Fela coined this term around 1969 to describe this music that he was beginning to play that had more political fervor. And for those who have or have not listened to this music would know that it goes a long distance. That I used to clean the house to Overtake Done Overtake. That's one song. It could play for 45 minutes. There are some songs where the horns play so long at the beginning that the vocals don't come in until 10 or 15 minutes into the track. As he stated, he didn't believe in this short music. His music goes a long distance. So let's explore what is this music saying to Africans in diaspora? What is it sonically doing? What feeling does it leave us with? What message is being promoted in these sounds? But let's explore the tonic quality, the tonal quality of the music. This particular tonal quality that we call jazz, we have to begin to explore the origins of this word jazz. The foundation of jazz has to do with tones that have come to be called blue notes, right? There's this prestigious place up in New York, Blue Note Records. Where does this term blue note come from? When grandmother is cooking greens in the kitchen and is singing this, that is cultural. There's someone's grandmother in Sweden that is not humming in that particular scale. When Europeans heard those tones, they described the notes that were not consistent with the Ionian scale as blue notes. And when I say Ionian scale, some people just call it the Western scale. It sounds like this. Right? That's usually what you would hear first or learn first in a piano lesson or in a music lesson. African people in captivity during the Ma'afa, in captivity, coming to these spaces like North America, where Baba Amiri Baraka describes us as blues people, the tones that we brought with us were not in alignment with that scale. They sounded more like this. Right? And you add feeling to that, because these particular sounds were not consistent with the Ionian scale or Western scale. They gained the nickname blue notes. Not even a nickname, they gained the misnomer of describing them as blue notes. For someone like Fela, for someone like James Brown, Bessie Smith, those notes are not blue whatsoever. In fact, it comes from the reinterpretation of unfamiliar stuff. In other words, Europeans who didn't understand the culture had to give those notes a name. But those notes come from a West African tonal system, So when we compare these two, we see how these particular notes become part of the sonic fabric of Afrobeat. They became a key component, as Fela would use jazz to some extent in place of where the talking drum would convey messages. The talking drum would give these messages and communicate, like for instance, in the language of Yoruba. So Fela would replace that or use the saxophones or the horns in the group to convey coded messages, much like the coded messages of the spirituals, where a proverb could be conveyed with the horn section, and the in-group, that group that would speak that language, would be able to understand what is taking place within the music. There's another aspect of the music that is of critical importance as it relates to the tone. And this is a concept known as the tritone. All of these concepts are pillars within the sound of Afrobeat. They're also pillars in some other music that may be more familiar to some. So there's this tritone. If you notice the note F and B, in the medieval Roman Catholic Church, they pretty much banned that chord progression and referred to it as the devil's chord or the devil's tone, this tritone. When in referencing something evil, that particular tone would be used. But if you listen to the guitar lick at the beginning of Fela's Expensive Shit, it sounds like this. That second chord, the interval, is a tritone, or what is labeled a tritone. So the beginning guitar lick of the song Expensive Shit has that. And again, we're looking at the clash of cultures. Those outside of the cultural experience end up labeling this the devil's tone or a tritone or what have you. Let me show how this is a shared cultural experience. Let's look at James Brown, The Big Payback. The bass line comes in. And the chord is doing this. That which you hear in the right hand is tritone. The movement of it fits that same thing. So when we explore the Pan-African connections between Fela and Afrobeat and these elements that we're hearing in other music, it speaks to a shared cultural experience. It speaks to a Pan-African experience. So from the time of Fela's connecting with Sister Sandra Isidore and the creation of Afrobeat, the tonality of the music usually was in a minor key. Just to make some connections, most hip hop is likely in a minor key. Minor key sounds like this. Major key sounds like here. Major keys tend to have a bit of a happier tone. Minor keys tend to give more of a serious tone. It delivers that particular mood of a certain seriousness. And it also, there's a connection between this Afrobeat and modal jazz in that there are these long vamps and long sweeping solos that the instruments would take, and because the music does not change keys, it allows for that individual to solo over the endless grooves. So we see the endless groove, this concept that Fela had of using every instrument as a drum. The vocals are usually chanted. There was a very intentional use of pidgin English, what people sometimes label broken English. He decided that he wouldn't put all of his songs in Yoruba as he wanted to communicate with people in regions where that language was not spoken. Another connection with Africans in diaspora and those of us here is that if you look at our experience in this part of the world, right? I'm in ATL. You will find that from the spirituals consistent all the way through hip hop. And I'm talking about spirituals, jazz scatting, ragtime, blues, gospel. Our music is delivered in our language, meaning that we're not trying to sound like Europeans. We're not trying to sound like white folks. Had Bessie Smith and Nas been trying to sound like white folks, we wouldn't have the blues, we would not have hip hop. So there's another connection. The call and response, the storytelling, what came to be known as yabis, this idea of signifying, where Fela would literally ridicule a political leader. He might even talk about the shape of his own head, or talk about individuals within the community, someone that was present, criticizing the government. That which we call joning, signifying, was commonplace within these shows. And these shows could last for the lengths of 7 hours, 6 or 7 hours. Shout out to Tony Allen, where it took 2 drummers to replace him after he left the band. Tony Allen, a very critical person as it relates to this iconic music of Afrobeat. So some other components to be considered would be the guitars with the chicken scratch, where there'd be one guitar playing more of a chordal pattern with the movement of usually the higher tone on the guitar. And also there's a tenor line that usually would be a single note, or the movement of a single note being played. There's a repetitive aspect of the bass. There's an aesthetic of cool. One thing interestingly missing from more contemporary African groups is the spirit of Pan-Africanism that Fela put within the music. When you pulled up to the shrine, there would be books written by Dr. Ben, that's Yosef Ben Yakinen, by Professor Sheikh Anta Diop, images of those like Malcolm X. Sister Sandra encouraged him to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. So we're seeing this connection of this music as being an African expression that also deeply incorporates aspects of an African diaspora. So I don't want to take up more time, but to end on Dr. Kofi Agawu's slide, this shows the level of consistency that we see within the Afrobeat music and traditional music over time. It expresses the will to communicate the truth. Energetic, vital, generous, inviting, elicits participation. At its highest level, it demands participation. When we play this music live, if you're a wallflower, something must be wrong with you. Performances are incomplete without listener, dance, or participant. The outward signs of repetition, grooves, polyrhythms, for participants to experience life beyond the ordinary, even as for the time being. So this speaks to this idea of, how should we say, the underground spiritual game. And I feel like that speaks to me personally when I can look in the legacy of my family and hear songs like Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Coming Forward to Carry Me Home. Of course, home meant Africa early on, later it meant heaven, and at some point it had to mean any place other than this cotton field. Sun Ra in the 1950s would say he wanted to help Black people escape to an intergalactic Egypt free of oppression. And he wanted to do that through his orchestra. Parliament Funkadelic, using the same concept of the mothership. Arrested Development, Take Me to Another Place, Bob Marley, Exodus. In other words, we know something is clearly wrong here. We know something is in balance with slavery, with white supremacy, with colonialism, and to explore the underground spiritual game with Fela would allow for us to have a temporary relief, even if it's just momentarily through the music. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Scales. That was very, very in-depth. Thank you for sharing. I like how you touched on the fusion of the blues, the keys, the call and response, the repetitive nature of Afrobeat that makes it chanty and spiritual. That is very important. And I like that you touched on the fact that Tony Allen played a big role in the foundation and the creation of Afrobeat, because as musicians and singers, when we go to the studio to make music, what do we start with first? They start with the metronome, and the beats is the heart of Africa. The rhythm is the heart of Africa. You cannot have any music without, first of all, the percussive nature, the beats. You have to start with the beats. So kudos to the late Tony Allen for being a very integral part. And of course, the socio-political aspect of it, kudos to Miss Isadore also. Oh, that was my time enough. For, igniting that activism in the legendary Fela Kuti. So moving right along, before we take the public Q&As, I just have a quick question. I know Miss Meredith has been putting her hand up. If she can type a question in the Q&A section, that will be very helpful. But just quickly, just a very quick, a short answer to one or two questions that I have. I'll go back to Mr. Mason, because we cannot talk about Fela Kuti and his spirituality. Spirituality played a very significant role in his music and worldview.
Are you going to forget our special guest?
Yeah, so I wanted them to answer the question, and then we go to the special guest. Yeah, I'll not forget. I'll not forget a special guest. So I just want him to quickly touch on that aspect and tell us how Fela Kuti's spiritual beliefs and African heritage, how it influenced the themes and the messages in his music, particularly in relation to African spirituality and cultural pride. Mr. Mason.
Yes.
Very quickly.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for the question. Fela, as you know, was a Yoruba, his parents were Yoruba tradition, and the pantheon of Yoruba deities. And the influence of that influenced Fela in his early life and also in his later life in terms of the music. And he also incorporated Pan-Africanism into that spirituality. Pan-African, African traditional religion, and also Pan-Africanism in terms of when he met Nkrumah. If you go to the shrine, Fela had this on Saturdays where he does a worship of Kwame Nkrumah, and Kwame Nkrumah in terms of the Pan-African. So the religion itself became embodied in a diaspora, not just his upbringing or his basically religion of the Yorubas, but he transgressed it into a Pan-Africanist movement in the spirituality, and it also showed in the music and the development and also the entrance of it.
Thank you so much. I think that also contributes to the fact that he actually named the place of music a shrine, which is a spiritual term for a place of worship. All right, thank you so much for that. And another quick question, Professor Mosiki, before we go to our special guest, is why are we having the music of Fela as an academic study? Why do we have to study? Why is it such an important thing to be part of a curriculum for like a Department of Africana Studies? Why do we have to study his music and his legacy? And how does it contribute to the broader discussions about music, identity, and activism?
Wow, it's so much involved with his music, as Brother Mason's presentation gave us just all of these different stages in his life, like all of the different people that he touched, so many people being inspired from his music. I feel like we could develop a class on him quite easily. I think I would encourage everyone to read Brother Mason's book, Afrobeat Got Soul. Also, I think there's This Bitch of a Life by Carlos Moore. There's The Life and Times of an African Musical Icon, Fela, by Michael Veal. And I just think that it's just very important that he touches on so much, and his passion is found within the music. I think that it's challenging sometimes for me to view him. I think we have to experience it through the music, but also study it as well. I think it's very important for us to just kind of go with Jimi Hendrix's idea that, are you experienced? Like, what does that music feel like? And when you hear the music, it's hard not to feel the passion, the discipline, the intention that played a critical role in developing such a powerful sound. And so much that has grown out of it, it literally has changed the world. With Afro beats, those people that are sampling him, sending us to the library with different terms and reading. I remember with my band, we were exploring the song Upside Down, the song that Sandra Isidore sang, Upside Down, and exploring that. We couldn't find the words online. We were trying to understand a bit of the pidgin English. We were just doing a lot of digging. And it's such a powerful song in terms of the lyrics, saying that, you know, with the impact of colonialism and neocolonialism, look at all of this land available. We could build roads, we could build houses, we can give ourselves African names. The song Suffering and Smiling, the idea that let us return to our traditional practice, let us embrace our own culture, kind of in the spirit of Nollywood. Let's consume that which we create. That his argument was that once we embrace other people's sacred spaces and other people's culture, we end up taking our resources to those spaces.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. We can't talk about Fela Kuti without talking about the women in his life. We know that he's been heavily influenced, of course, by his mother. He had a very special connection to his mother. And his mother is like Mr. Mason did in his presentation, told us a little background of how powerful she was during her time. You know, the first Nigerian woman to drive a car. You know, she was all about Pan-Africanism. So Fela was surrounded by activism growing up. But there's a special lady also in his life who ignited, you know, the next level of his activism in his music and exposed him to, you know, Black power and all the philosophies of the Black American experience. So it's such a pleasure of mine to bring onto the stage. Somebody guessed right in the chat, asking as a special guest, Sandra Isadore. Yes, you are correct. And for those who don't know her, Sandra Isadore is a Black rights activist and singer who is known for her association with Fela Kuti. She played a significant role in influencing Fela Kuti's music and political activism. Just like I said, introducing him to the writings of Malcolm X, Angela Davis, Brown, Stokely Carmichael, and all the revolutionary thinkers. And Fela credits her with helping to inspire his philosophy on Blackism. We're just gonna have Ms. Sandra come and just share, just for a couple of minutes, maybe tell us what the most rewarding aspect of her relationship with Fela Kuti in terms of the music, in terms of activism, in terms of personal growth. So if she's in the Zoom, let's everybody say, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Ms. Sandra?
Everybody say, yeah, yeah, yeah.
The floor is yours for a couple of minutes. It's a pleasure to have you here. Please share with us.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Singer, it's good to see Mason and Music Scales, who I've worked with. Yes, as you can see behind me, Fela is big up in this.
Oh, wait,
house.
we need your camera on, please.
Camera is on.
We need your camera on, please.
Okay. Well, I thought my camera was on. Let's see. Turn it around.
Logo make Africa.
Wait a minute. You can't see me? Okay, let's see. They can't see me. Well, I don't know. I came in on the host. The host has to whatever. But I'm here and I could see everybody.
Well, someone said we're loving, oh, it was Dr. Uma just says, we love your logo. We love what it says. Make Africa great again.
Yes, okay, that's my logo. But I don't know, I might have the wrong link. So that may be the reason why, because it says,
you should be able to be.
I think I'm on the host page.
Yeah, you should be able to be bring your camera in now.
Okay.
The other side.
I think
the host
has made some adjustments. So
oh, there we are.
Yes.
Okay.
Tell us.
Here I am.
Yeah.
And as you can see, it's all behind me. And this is the book that I've written, Fela and Me. And of course, this is the CD, Upside Down, that Fela wrote for me in 1976. You can see me there. But I've learned a lot here today, especially from Professor Scales. I even took some notes because as soon as I get off this call, I'm going to put those notes together. The other thing here, you know, this is the month of October where celebration is live and direct. And this Sunday, we will be celebrating Lagos to LA. I happen to be working with Guillermo Tejada and also Dwayne Richmond. We have Cosign or Co-Sing, another producer who's going to be here in LA. And we're doing our little Lagos to LA event. But this has been very interesting. Oh, the one thing that Mason didn't mention was the 1969 session. Fela recorded here in 1969. So I think that's on YouTube now. You can see that on YouTube. And also Fela's mom, she gave me the Red Book. And it was an original copy that she had received from Mao Zedong when she made her trip to China. So I wanted you to be aware of that as well. But thank you for having me. It's been informative, and I can't wait to get to the keyboard to try some of these notes Dr. Scales was speaking of. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sister Sandra. Such a pleasure to see you. And you have beautiful eyes, I just have to say. When I look at the pictures of you and Fela, your eyes just stand out. They're still beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Beautiful. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. We're so honored. I don't know if we have any other questions for our panelists tonight. I'm looking at the question and answer. The only question I saw, which I tried to answer, but I don't know if Mr. Mason or Professor Masiki wants to contribute to that, was asking why, or even Sister Sandra, asking why Fela married 27 wives. That was the rationale behind that. That's the only public question I have here.
I don't know if Sandra want to take that, but I'll just briefly say my piece about that. But well, he wanted to legitimize these women because he felt that the public or the society was casting them as, you know, either wayward prostitutes or, you know, people that were not really upward in society in terms of the eyes of the, you know, the society. So he wanted to make them legit, or he wanted to make them as part of a, you know, something that they will not cast any negative, you know, sayings or perceptions about them. So that's why he married those women. And again, the other reason is actually defiance, because that is outside the norm. And I know Nigerians, or, you know, the tradition, there are people who marry, especially people who are wealthy or whatever, have Muslims have different women or more, you know, wives. But Fela did it in a defiance, in a way of showing defiance. So those are the two aspects, I think. Sandra, you want to add to that?
Well, I have to agree with you. It was to legitimize and dignify those women so that the public could stop their derogatory remarks against the women. So that's absolutely correct.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question. I think it was made you. I do have another question from Professor Masiki. It says, could you explain what MAAFA is?
Yes. So there is one of our elder scholars, Dr. Marimba Ani, who suggested in the 1980s that we use the term Maafa. It is spelled M-A-A-F-A, Kiswahili term that means the great destruction, or that speaks to the impact of transatlantic slavery and the cultural impact and the impact on our families, the impact on our relationships. And she suggested this term different than the use of the term Holocaust, that this would be a term that's more suitable for the African world. And it has taken on deep meaning. So as we remember our ancestors that were in the forced migration across the Atlantic Ocean, the impact of Jim Crow, the impact of slavery and captivity, that term is used to describe our experience through that, the impact.
Thank you. And you want to mention a little more about the Lagos and LA initiative? Somebody.
Yes, that's this.
Oh.
That's this Sunday.
Oh, okay. I just saw that in the chat.
Hey there, folks. This is a Memo. I want to say thank you so much for the amazing knowledge. I'm so humbled to be in the presence of intellectuals and people that are carrying the heritage in the way that you are. I am not African American, at least not that I know of, because you start learning about colonialism, and you figure out that especially being Mexican, there's always that hidden Black grandma, someone that no one talks about. You know what I'm saying? So that's another conversation. But I want to say more profusely and more what the LA Lagos show's about is
sorry to cut you short. Can you tell us who you are, your name? Because
yes. Can I start my video?
You can show your video too, because you have one of our panelists' name showing. So we just need to...
okay. I was just trying to show my face. It's kind of weird without showing my face. But
okay.
My name is Memo. I am a teacher in South Central. I've been working in education for 14 years. And also a musician. I came across the opportunity to work with Sandra, and through our conversations came up with trying to piece a story for Angelenos to have an understanding of the magnitude of when Fela met Sandra and what that means to LA music and to the LA cultural schemata, if you will, musically, and also too, and just trying to understand like all that funkadelic that you brought up, all that. There's so much like embedded West Coast feel when we listen to Fela Kuti. We connect in a very West Coast way that comes to like that speaks to the certain like way that we digest music here in Los Angeles. So I feel like a big way of like creating harmony and exploring that intersection between Lagos and LA is to really study, commemorate, and to celebrate the story and the legacy of Fela. So I'm excited because I'm a teacher. This entire a show was put together like a lesson plan, and my objective is to be able to uplift the LA voice by making that connection and understand that Afrobeat is profusely Black, and that we have a commitment to each other in this way that like speaks through the music. And so when I hear Fela, I hear people working, I hear people like hustling to work and trying to build a better world. So that's what inspires me.
Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. We're going to be rounding up this beautiful panel discussion that we've had wonderful panelists. And before I hand over to Dr. Umoja, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, for joining. It's been wonderful, knowledgeable. And on behalf of the Georgia State University Department of Africana Studies and the Auburn Avenue Research Library, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude, and I'm sure on behalf of Professor Mosiki and Mr. Mason also, thank you both for sharing tonight. And of course, Sister Sandra for also joining tonight on such a short notice. I want to thank our panelists who have offered invaluable insights into Fela Kuti's life, music, and activism, and enriching our understanding of his enduring influence in music and culture. And in honoring Fela Kuti today, we carry forward his legacy with events like the Lagos and LA and celebration worldwide. And we continue to fight for social justice. And we continue to also challenge the status quo in every way we can, even as artists. Thank you once again for being an integral part of this enlightening discussion. And we look forward to a continued dialogue, collaboration, and a shared dedication to uplifting the spirit of Fela Kuti's timeless legacy. I am Tosinga. It's been a pleasure, and I'm handing over to Dr. Akinyele Umoja.
Thank you, Sister Tosinga. Man, this has been a great panel. I think Professor Skills, I'm about to give you your PhD, bro. But, you wanted to add something else about the LA connection? You know I'm all about the West Side, so you want to say something else about Fela and LA? Please go ahead.
I think that's what
added that, yes.
That was the brother. That was the other brother. I got
that's
confused.
yeah,
okay, I got it.
That was Memo.
Okay. Well, I just this has been a great panel. I think I've listened to a lot of our freedom schools, and I would say this is, to me, one of the most exciting ones and very interdisciplinary. And plus, we had a historic guest with Sister Sandra Isidore. I've been hearing about her forever. She's mentioned in the Fela play.
Yeah.
And I'm just and I know the celebration is coming up. I'd like to know if Masiki, if you can give us some information on that or when it's gonna happen, in case some of the people locally want to check it out. In Atlanta, I should say, because people might be watching this.
Right. I don't think we're having a celebration here in Atlanta this go round, but I think Sister Sandra, aren't you all planning a celebration out west? We got to take a trip.
Yes.
Dr. Moja.
Yes,
Callie.
Ours is October 15th. It's Lagos to LA. As Memo was telling you, the last person that spoke, he's the one that has organized it and put it all together. So that'll be taking place this Sunday, 7 p.m. You know, it's already jumped off yesterday in Nigeria. So I spoke with Yenny yesterday, so it's on and popping.
That's beautiful.
So we're celebrating now. We are celebrating.
And one of the things that Professor Sells mentioned to me in preparation for this is we're going to be looking to do something live, possibly at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, to continue this conversation. And he really wants to bring that keyboard out. And he had me moving tonight just in playing some chords. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I want to announce a couple of other events that are coming up. If I could share my screen for a minute. And one is at the end of this month, it's 10 years since my book, We Will Shoot Back, Armed Resistance in the Mississippi Freedom Movement. So we're gonna just take a time to note that, to talk about what's happened since the 10-year anniversary. And it actually will be a celebration with some libation and performance from the Colombo School, a few comments from a few other people about the book, as well as a book signing, and we're gonna break bread as well. So that's one thing that's coming up. Of course, the department has the Freedom School series going on, and upcoming will be next week. We'll have Martha Akawa will speak on women, gender, and the Namibian Liberation Movement. That'll be at noon next week on the 17th. Then Dr. Julian Hill that evening, who's in the law school, will be speaking on Black Solidarity Economy Lawyering. Oh man, I'm from Compton. I can't pronounce a word like that. It ain't any bonics, right, Brother Masiki? That word going by that European scale you talked about. Anyway, then Dr. Joyce King, we call her Nana Joyce in the College of Education. One of the veteran professors, elder professors at Georgia State. Black Studies, Creative, Critical, Collective Resistance. That's more my speed. Liberating Pedagogy in the Guardians of Heritage and the Songhai, it says here, Princess Clubs. And this is based on some actual work that she's doing in the diaspora with education. And finally on November 28th, that's after Thanksgiving, I think there'll be a book talk from Tiffany Yannick, Monster in the Middle. That's what we got lined up this semester. And of course, we have in November will also be the hip hop conference, a popular culture conference that Dr. Burnett Bailey is going to be doing this semester. We should have folded this in there as well. But the popular culture conference, I know that myself, my niece Ife Jai and Brother Watani Tahimba and others will be doing a panel on Dr. Mutulu Shakur. Maybe we could get Brother Masiki's partner on that as well, but I'll try to talk her into it. But of course, you know, she was at one time the publicist for Tupac Shakur and worked with the Shakur family in that way. But that's some of the things the department has coming up, as well as for the alumni out there and current staff, faculty and students. Homecoming week is this weekend, and we'll be having a tailgate at the homecoming events. I think it'll be at 4:30 on this coming Saturday at the stadium. You know, the Georgia State got a stadium now. Who would have thunk it? I remember we didn't even had no dorms. Okay, so I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Sister Isadora for coming and being a part of this. We're certainly honored with her presence. I'm looking forward to meeting her. She's in an ATL. We want to thank Sister Tosinger for helping to guide us. Next time we're going to want to hear you sing, as Brother Masiki suggested. But we'll have you back for that. And most thanks goes to Mason, who, like I said, inspired this whole thing with him telling me about his book and selling me his book this summer. Too bad we were not face to face. Maybe when we do it face to face with Professor Scales, we could actually sell the book there at the Auburn Avenue Research. And again, big ups to Professor Scales. I learned a lot from both of them, both our presenters tonight, as well as Sister Isadora. Not only did I learn some of the stuff they taught, but I'm taking down, like, I didn't know about this Tony Allen album, tribute to, I wrote it down, bro.
He named his group Afro Messengers after the Jazz Messengers.
So a lot of diasporic connection that we have as a part of this conversation. And, you know, I really think we need more conversation. Professor Scales, do you know what you're teaching next semester?
I think it's the 3810 music class, African American music, and then intro.
So maybe we could tie your lecture to that class. We're going to get on that.
Okay.
And so we'll make sure that happens. And maybe we could get, I know you got a few albums out there.
In fact, Sister Sandra, we got a tune, Nana Africa.
Is that recorded now yet?
Oh, it's out. I'll put the link in the chat.
Yes.
Oh, nice. See, we're doing some things. We got to build that entrepreneurship, that cooperative economics with what we're doing as well.
Yes.
If we don't push it, nobody else will, right?
That's it.
Yeah, and I need to send you some links to some of my music.
I would like that. So Singer to said that? Or was that Sandra?
It's freezing.
Sandra.
Oh, Sister Sandra.
Yeah, so now we got to get this thing going.
It's freezing.
Sandra, I see you in LA. Remember? We're gonna do She's frozen up there.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. We're going to close it on out. Thank everybody for tuning in. I saw a lot of my students in the chat. And this will be held for on YouTube and on the department, and as well as Auburn Avenue Research Library's Facebook pages. So thanks a lot. Thanks everybody. Thank all the panelists for participating.
Sandra, see you soon.
Yes.
Bye.